The elusive Bigfoot, described as an ape-like being and reputed to inhabit the forests of North America, has sparked countless expeditions and a multitude of reported sightings. However, photographic evidence remains scant and often controversial. Imagine the shock and excitement when a seasoned wildlife photographer reportedly captured images of what appeared to be a baby Bigfoot in the wilderness playing among deer. The individual who took the photograph said that it seems to be the real deal. Given the size of its hand, the photographer believes that this is a true photo of a young Bigfoot, because no deer would approach a person or child that closely. They added that they think it shows a young, inexperienced Bigfoot that became so enthralled with the deer that it was completely unaware that the photographer was there. It was reported that the photographer originally aimed to document the local deer population, focusing on their behavior and interaction with the environment. Armed with high-resolution cameras and a deep understanding of animal habits, he positioned himself in a secluded spot, hoping to capture some candid moments. A small group of deer emerged from the thicket, grazing peacefully in the clearing. He silently adjusted his camera, capturing the serene scene. Suddenly, a peculiar movement caught his eye. Among the deer, a small, bipedal creature darted playfully. Initially, they thought it might be a bear cub or an unusually agile young animal, but as he zoomed in, the distinct features of the creature became evident. It was unlike anything he had seen before. The creature stood on two legs, covered in dark fur, with an oddly human-like face and expressive eyes. Its playful demeanor and interaction with the deer suggested it was a young being, possibly a juvenile Bigfoot. The man's heart raced as he clicked away, capturing a series of images that would soon ignite a firestorm of debate and speculation. The man claimed that he could see several distinct features as he zoomed in, mentioning that the mysterious humanoid creature didn't resemble a human, and that it had big hands and a large nose. The photographs were submitted to various groups on social media, and many who viewed them agreed that it showed a small, hairy bipedal figure with distinct facial features and a curious, playful behavior. As mentioned, many who saw the photograph said that the creature was likely interacting with the deer, which appeared unperturbed by its presence. The high quality of the images allowed for detailed scrutiny, showing clear outlines and distinguishing marks that ruled out the possibility of a mere shadow or photographic artifact. One person added that they've tried to do this in the wild and the deer are very wary, saying there's no way a human in a suit is getting that near to natural wild deer, as they are very skittish. The images have been hailed as some of the clearest images we have of an alleged baby Bigfoot. The clarity and context of the photos set them apart from typical blurry and ambiguous Bigfoot sightings. These images seem to offer a rare, credible glimpse into the life of an elusive creature long relegated to the realms of folklore and speculation. One of the primary reasons clear photographs of Bigfoot are important is that they could serve as definitive proof of the creature's existence. The debate over whether Bigfoot is real has been ongoing for decades, with skeptics and believers often clashing over the available evidence. High-quality, clear photographs could resolve this debate by providing indisputable visual evidence that Bigfoot exists. Such photographs would need to be detailed enough to show the creature's physical features, such as fur texture, facial structure, and body proportions, which can be analyzed scientifically. This would go a long way in silencing skeptics and providing a basis for further research. Clear photographs of Bigfoot would be invaluable for advancing scientific understanding of this mysterious creature, and they would provide a basis for detailed analysis and comparison with known species, helping scientists to classify and understand Bigfoot's place in the natural world. These new photographs have reignited interest in Bigfoot research, prompting renewed expeditions and scientific inquiry. Funding for studies has seen a boost, with researchers seeking to gather more comprehensive evidence, including physical samples and environmental data. Interestingly, the encounter also raises further questions about the treatment and protection of potentially undiscovered species. If Bigfoot exists, ensuring its habitat and well-being becomes paramount. Researchers who have spent countless years looking into the creature have argued for a cautious approach, emphasizing the need to balance scientific curiosity with respect for wildlife, and adding that the closer we can get to these creatures without disturbing them, the more we will be able to learn about them. A Bigfoot encounter on Mount Shasta. Sightings of Bigfoot or Sasquatch-like creatures have been reported in the area since the national park formed. The earliest reference to giant humanoid creatures living in the region comes from early Native American legends of a creature referred to as the Shupchits. Although the legends were not written down until around the spring of 1953, when nearby university professors interviewed Native American tribes from the region, the stories told remarkably similar descriptions of the local residents' claims of Sasquatch-like creatures dwelling within the mountains. According to these early Native American legends, a race of giants referred to as the Shupchits were believed to have lived alongside the banks and source of the Flume Creek and were claimed to use secret underground passes and cave systems to reach the top of Mount Shasta. Sasquatch legends would reach their popularity in the area back in 1962, when a woman who had been camping out near the base of the mountain claimed to have stumbled across a hidden area created by the Bigfoot people. In her bizarre claims, she described hiking around the mountain and finding what looked like primitive tents and makeshift huts from leaves, branches, and stripped bark. Within an area of tall, bundled grasses, the woman watched as a large Sasquatch creature appeared to give birth to a small monkey-like creature. Unable to move, the pregnant Sasquatch woman watched the hiker, and once the birth was over, the hiker ran from the area as the pregnant Sasquatch immediately began moving as if it were going to attack. In 1971, a man by the name of Virgil Larson would also claim to have a fantastic encounter with Sasquatch creatures in the area, with his account being reported in the local newspapers before reaching mainstream popularity. According to the Mount Shasta Herald, Virgil Larson, a 47-year-old man who was originally from the small town of Salmon, Idaho, was temporarily living in the area of Mount Shasta while working for a logging company. During his time working for the company, he claimed to have seen a non-human creature at around 8:30 in the morning near a helicopter logging operation. According to Virgil Larson, he and his logging partner, a man by the name of Pat Conway, had decided to hike down the side of the mountain while taking a short break. Once the two men had separated, Virgil then claimed to see what he originally believed was a Forest Service man walking down the mountain's slope near his location. Familiar with many of the workers in the area, Virgil motioned to the figure and shouted a warm greeting. Immediately, the figure froze in his tracks and turned towards Virgil Larson before attempting to rush down the side of the mountain in a different direction. Unsure of what was going on, Virgil walked closer to the figure and shouted again, causing the figure to duck behind a nearby bush and peek its head over in Virgil's direction. It was at this moment that Virgil realized that the figure was not a Forest Service worker and was instead some unknown, non-human entity. The stench of the creature started to disorient Larson, as he would later recount that he had most likely been downwind from the creature and could smell its pungent scent, which he likened to the smell of a half-rotten bear hide. Although he was unsure of the physical description of the creature, as Virgil had been unable to get a good look at the strange figure, he believed that it had been covered in a dirty, unkempt hair that started at the eyebrow line and stretched over its forehead and head, leaving only his eyes, nose, and mouth exposed. Terrified by the strange sighting, Larson immediately ran from the creature back up the slope and told several of his co-workers what he had seen. Several of the workers immediately fashioned makeshift clubs and believed Larson's account without any sense of skepticism, as many of the workers had heard stories of similar creatures in the area. Shortly after fashioning their weapons, the men returned to where Larson had encountered the creature and were able to smell the pungent smell Larson had described. Some of the men described the smell as a rotting corpse smell, while others compared it to a pungent skunk smell. Despite spending another 30 minutes in the area, the men were unable to find any signs of the hairy humanoid creature. Terrified that similar creatures were lurking nearby, the men would contact the local authorities to conduct a proper investigation. Several hours later, Virgil Larson would be greeted by members of the United States Forest Service after using their CB radios to contact the nearby sheriff's department. The U.S. Forest Service members Sergeant Bullington, along with Bob Gray, Rex Lebo, and Don Wopshall, took the witness testimony of Virgil Larson completely seriously and started the investigation within the hour. After using the bush that the creature had been standing behind as a reference point, the U.S. Forest Service members believed the creature to have been standing at a height of about 7.5 feet tall. Fresh stains had been found on neighboring branches, and were collected to be sent to a lab for study, and a series of tracks all across the side of the mountain were photographed for future reference. The results of the blood samples and laboratory findings would not be made public. The official explanation of the Virgil Larson case was blamed on a group of environmentalists that had been camped roughly 2 miles from the logging operation, believing that the group may have fabricated a hoax in the attempt to scare the loggers away from the operation. Despite this easy explanation, the environmentalist group would claim they had nothing to do with the sighting, and Virgil Larson himself would conduct several interviews with local newspapers claiming that he saw something completely non-human that day. Additionally, the size, smells, and the movement of the creature would have been difficult to have hoaxed at the time. Since this report, hundreds of sightings of Sasquatch encounters have been reported by local residents and distant travelers visiting the site. This has led many researchers into believing that the area of Mount Shasta is host to supernatural conditions and Sasquatch-like creatures. Additionally, Mount Shasta is host to a series of interconnected caves and underground caverns that are believed to connect areas all throughout the mountain and surrounding forests. Similar to the case of the Ohio Grassman creature using abandoned mine shafts and caves for habitation, the Mount Shasta Sasquatch creatures could have similar means of travel and dwelling. The mysterious Belt Road Booger. The Belt Road Booger is an ape-like humanoid creature that reportedly walks on 2 legs and eats fruits and vegetables, destroying crops and gardens throughout the town of Newnan, Georgia. Eyewitnesses have described the creature as standing around 5 feet tall, having a large beaver-like wide tail covered in thick fur, large glowing eyes, a strange dog-like face, and could occasionally be seen running on all 4 limbs. Though the earliest known sightings of the creature were reported back in the 1950s, the monster was not named and given publicity until the 1979 mass sightings within the town of Newnan, Georgia. However, these sightings are often the source of major dispute, with many residents of the town coming forward and claiming that a high school classmate was responsible for the many 1979 recorded sightings after having purchased a gorilla suit. Despite these admissions, many residents of Newnan believe in the creature as other similar sightings continue to be reported throughout the town that fit more common Bigfoot Sasquatch physical descriptions. A handful of researchers classify the sightings of the Belt Road Booger as devil monkey encounters, given its much smaller size and atypical head structure compared to standard Bigfoot reports. According to the Times-Herald, the earliest known report of the creature would be filed by a woman who claimed that she had first encountered the creature while she had been driving through the intersection of Belt Road and West Washington Street, located within the small town of Newnan, during early August of 1979. The driver would later call the local law enforcement to describe the creature and ask for the officers to investigate the matter further. She would be quoted as describing the creature as dark, adding that it stood about 5 feet tall. Unsure of what to make of the report, the officers would dismiss the claim as having been a misidentification of one of the many local species of wildlife journeying within the town's borders, a common occurrence for the small town. After several more reports over the following days of a strange, 5-foot-tall humanoid creature covered in head-to-toe with fur and featuring bright glowing eyes, the officers began to look more closely at the potential cause of the reports. 2 more bizarre reported sightings would be made throughout the month and the following month, including a report from a housewife who claimed to have seen the monster digging in her nearby garden. The event was reported to the local law enforcement, where the witness described seeing a strange-looking animal standing in her backyard, located within the Meadowview subdivision near Okoi. She claimed that the monster stood somewhere between an estimated height of 4 to 5 feet and was covered in dark black hair and had a moving tail that looked more like a beaver's, completely covered in hair. When staring at the creature's face, she noted that the animal's head was unlike any other creature she had seen, able to walk around on 2 feet, and looked similar to a dog's face with glowing eyes. Unsure of what the monster was, the woman immediately entered her home and called the local law enforcement, but before officers could arrive, the beast had already vanished. Evidence of the creature's presence was noticed by officers, as many of the flowers in the garden had been dug and the roots of plants appeared to have been chewed through. Several more sightings were recorded at the Belt Road intersection, the Smoky Road, and the Ishman Ballard Road, with matching descriptions of the creature recorded at each event. Over the next few months, Reports would come in at increasingly distant intervals until the creature seemed to no longer make appearances by the following year. Within that span of time, several notable sightings were reported that were difficult to answer. One such sighting was reported outside of a Kmart warehouse, where workers and security guards claimed to have spotted a creature described as a 5-foot-tall creature covered in black fur and featuring a long beaver-like tail, had attempted to scale a fence and break into the warehouse, only to be scared away. Left behind in the area of the sighting was an apple that appeared to have had one large bite in it that removed the core and left behind the majority of the flesh. The Highway 16 reported sighting. Back in 2006, a woman claimed to have encountered what she believed was the Belt Road Booger when traveling through the town of Newnan, Georgia. According to the eyewitness, she had been driving on Highway 16, passing through the area immediately around Poplar Road when she noticed what she described as an 8-foot-tall creature standing in the middle of the highway. Unsure of what she was looking at, the woman slowed and drove closer to the animal, which appeared to have been covered in dark black fur, with hair that was long and shaggy, and appeared to have been both thick and bristly. The head of the creature also appeared to have been completely covered in hair, with no discernible features except for massive sharp teeth that protruded from its mouth and glowing yellowing eyes. Terrified of what she was looking at, she sped out of the area and kept the encounter a secret for more than 3 years before she reported it to the Times-Herald after hearing about other reported witness encounters similar to her own. The 1950s sighting. During the rise in popularity of the Belt Road Booger, several eyewitnesses would come forward over the years, admitting they had seen a strange creature over the past few decades but had been too nervous to openly talk about, out of fear of ridicule. One reported sighting occurred back during the early 1950s when a man claimed that he had seen a similarly described creature when he was a young boy living on his parents' property located in East Newnan. According to the man, he had been alone playing outside when he heard a large amount of noise and racket coming from one of their barns. Curious as to what was making the noise, the boy went over to the barn and opened the door. Once he opened the door, he claimed to have seen a large bipedal ape-like creature emerge from the barn and run past him out into the nearby wilderness, disappearing quickly from the area. The creature would be seen once again during the mid-1980s when the boy, who was now a grown man, was sitting on the front porch of the property with his family. According to the man's daughter, the family had been sitting on the front porch, talking and having fun, when they suddenly noticed a hairy creature walking in the yard. It was difficult to get a good look at the creature, as the event occurred during dusk, but the family claimed they could see that it was a dark, furry monster standing at about 5 feet high. Once spotted, the creature jumped an inhuman height and scaled a 10-foot wall, disappearing from the property for the last time. The 2005 sightings. Several isolated eyewitness sightings of large, Bigfoot-like creatures would be reported within and around the small town of Newnan, Georgia, sometime during the spring of 2005, given the name of the Happy Valley Horror. Despite this new name, many of the residents believed that the creatures known as the Happy Valley Horrors were also responsible for the 1979 mass sightings of creatures referred to as the Belt Road Booger. The first sighting of the Happy Valley Horror was reported during the month of April, when a Newnan hunter and self-proclaimed avid outdoorsman claimed that he had seen a massive hairy creature walking on 2 feet, standing out in a field, completely upright, located in the Happy Valley Circle of Newnan. He claimed that the sight of the creature had terrified him and looked exactly like how he imagined a Bigfoot creature to look like. Another sighting of a similar creature would be reported on the 22nd of August, 2005, by a man only 18 years old named Jeff Robards, who claimed to have seen the same monster after he had dropped his sister off at her house. According to Jeff Robards, he and his sister were returning to her home located in East Coweta, passing west on Cedar Creek Road. After dropping off his sister, he returned to the intersection at around 2:30 in the morning to head home when he stopped at a stop sign. While stopped, he glanced around and noticed what he described as a massive hairy creature walking down the middle of the road towards his vehicle. Jeff would claim that the creature was much larger than a man, but was walking upright and completely covered in hair. Before the creature could get too close to his vehicle, he sped off from the area and quickly returned to his parents' home, telling them about his sighting. Jeff would describe the creature as having had a flat face with no discernible features. Although Jeff's parents would not believe him initially, his mother, Donna Robards, would also report a strange sighting only 3 days later, on the 25th of August, 2005. According to Donna Robards, she had been working late in the city of LaGrange and was returning home later at night, driving north towards her home on Happy Valley Sur, when she noticed something strange at the Cedar Creek Road intersection. Unlike her son, who only reported seeing a single creature, Donna Robards claimed that she saw 2 creatures standing in the intersection several yards in front of her vehicle. Immediately, she stopped the car and watched as the smaller of the 2 creatures, a 7-foot-tall bipedal humanoid ape-like creature, ran off into the nearby woods and disappeared. The other creature, that stood at an estimated height of around 8 feet tall, just stood completely motionless, staring at the vehicle. Donna would describe the creature as being covered from head to toe in long, shaggy hair that was reddish-brown in color. After about a minute, the creature then turned and walked into the woods in the same direction as the first creature. Theories and connections. Sometime in 2009, a small group of private investigators would look into the early 1979 reports of the Belt Road Booger and conclude that the beast was not the same as many of the other reported Bigfoot sightings throughout North America, noting its affinity for vegetables and man-made crops rather than wild foraged plants and meat, similar to past Bigfoot sightings. Though some of the reports matched well-known and well-documented Bigfoot and Sasquatch characteristics, nearly all of the reported sightings during 1979 were atypical in their physical descriptions, leading the investigators to believe that the creature was a different species entirely, or possibly a devil-monkey encounter. The devil monkey is described as being a 3 to 4 foot tall primate-like creature that possesses fur covering its body from head to toe. Although witness encounters have not been as specific, evidence of the footprint of the creature, as well as from witness testimony, claims that the feet of the creature typically end in 3 large clawed toes. The face of the creature is often described as looking similar to a dog's, with an enlarged snout and small pointed ears. The body of the creature is often described as being similar to that of a baboon, possessing a long bushy tail. In a few isolated incidents, the devil monkey has been reported as being able to climb a standing tree in only a few seconds, with ease, and was capable of leaping distances of up to 20 feet. Though some witness statements have claimed to see a devil monkey roughly 8 feet tall, many researchers have considered such sightings to be misidentifications of known dogmen or Sasquatch-like creatures. Several adults, who were attending Noonan High School at the time of the sightings, would come forward nearly 30 years after the event to confirm suspicions that the Belt Road Booger sightings were nothing more than a hoax perpetrated by one of their classmates at the school. Although the majority of the adults would choose to remain anonymous, several men, including an officer and a man by the name of Joe Perry, would write to the Times-Herald that one of their classmates, an unidentified man whose father used to run a local mechanics shop, had purchased a realistic monkey costume and attempted to scare residents of the town in a series of pranks through the night. According to the ex-Noonan High School students, the pranks were all done in good fun and were never supposed to attract the attention that they did over the years, but was blown out of proportion by a handful of residents that were unaware of costume and origin of the prank that would eventually report their encounters to local newspapers. Once the publicity took off, the classmates made efforts not to reveal who the culprit was, as the sudden rise in tourist attraction and popularity of the small town was desirable and could have been jeopardized if the event was revealed to have been a hoax. Additionally, many of the ex-students would claim that the culprit responsible for the Belt Road Booger sightings would later purchase a large lizard-like outfit and be responsible for the lizard man of Scape or swamp sightings a few years later, though it appears that these comments were most likely made in jest. Despite these claims and admissions, there are many residents who still believe that the Belt Road Booger was real, as they claimed to have had isolated sightings of a bizarre humanoid ape-like creature in the surrounding region. It is possible that several of the reported sightings were made in genuine earnest and could be evidence of a Bigfoot or Sasquatch creature, as there were several atypical sightings of the Belt Road Booger that would have been incredibly difficult to explain, such as a sighting featuring an 8-foot-tall Bigfoot-like creature and a similar designed monster that was reported as scaling a wall nearly 10 feet in height. The Ohio Grassman connection. The Ohio Grassman is believed to be a Sasquatch Bigfoot-type creature commonly sighted across the state of Ohio. Unlike typical Sasquatch sightings, the Ohio Grassman appears to have glowing red or orange eyes that are believed to illuminate on their own rather than being reflections of the light. Witness descriptions claim the creature to stand around 6 to 7 feet in height and weigh an estimated 300 pounds. The creature's physical description is commonly compared to being an ape-like creature, though typically seen standing on 2 legs and walks perfectly while bipedal, unlike the average ape or monkey species. The first recorded sighting of the Ohio Grassman is believed to have been reported outside the small town of Minerva, Ohio, back during the summer of 1978. According to the official report, a married couple by the name of Evelyn and Hal Clayton claimed that while they had been tasked with babysitting their grandchildren, they encountered an ape-like humanoid creature described as standing at around 6 feet in height, weighing an estimated 300 pounds and covered from head to toe in dark matted fur. At the time of the sighting, the grandparents were unaware of legends surrounding claims of the Sasquatch or Bigfoot, and so believed that the creature was far more supernatural in its appearance. According to Evelyn and Hal Clayton, the elderly couple had let their grandchildren play outside in the front yard of their home when suddenly the group of kids ran into the house screaming and crying. Unsure of what was happening, the grandparents consoled the kids and asked them why they were upset. From what could be gathered, the grandparents claimed that the children and their friends had been playing together near a gravel pit outside when they saw a large, hairy animal slowly coming towards them. At first, the creature appeared to be standing at a distance, watching the children from afar, but slowly travelled closer and closer to the group before standing on its hind legs and walking over to the kids in long strides. Terrified of the creature, the children ran inside. At first, the grandparents had assumed that the children and their friends had encountered a native bear species, as bears are known for keeping their distance while stalking prey, only to come in for an attack when they feel adequately capable, or when natural food sources dwindle. This would cause the elderly couple to grab a few firearms and exit their house to go investigate the claims of the monster near the gravel pit. Once Evelyn and Hal Clayton reached the area of the gravel pit, they would quickly realize that the unknown creature was definitely not a bear. The Claytons would describe the creature as being a large ape man, seemingly rolling around and playing in the gravel pit where the children had been. At first, the creature had not noticed the Claytons until Evelyn had made a terrified shriek, which caused the monster to suddenly stand on its 2 legs and turn to the couple. It would be at this moment that the elderly couple would claim to have seen the creature with a nearly perfect view, describing the monster as standing at an estimated 6 feet in height, weighing somewhere around 300 pounds and completely covered from head to toe in a hard matted fur. Before the creature could react any further, the couple would run back into the house and barricade the building, telling the children to stay together, though the monster had failed to follow the couple and appeared to disappear shortly after. This initial encounter would not be the final sighting that the elderly couple would claim to experience, as the bizarre humanoid ape-like monster was consistently spotted throughout the surrounding area over the course of several years. During another reported encounter, the Claytons would describe seeing the creature peering into their home through a closed glass window while they had been preparing to go to bed. According to Evelyn Clayton, who had first spotted the creature pressed up against the window, she had screamed and pointed at the monster, causing Hal Clayton to also spot the creature and immediately run to go grab the closest firearm. By the time Hal returned to the window, the creature had already disappeared into the nearby woodlands. Worried that the unknown creature would return to their home, the Claytons would call the local Minerva Police Department shortly after their sighting and file an official police report on the matter. Although the local law enforcement were unable to corroborate any sightings of the creature, upon closer examination of the area outside their window, the police would claim to observe several large footprints in the mud that appeared to support their claim of a large humanoid animal somewhere in the region. The police report would also make mention of a terrible lingering smell that was described as smelling similar to rotten eggs. At another time, the Claytons would claim to see the same unexplainable creature standing near a hilltop several hundred yards from where they had been going for a stroll. Several days later, the elderly couple would go investigate the hilltop and discover that the area had once been a strip mine and most likely went through the hill for several tens of thousands of square feet. Believing that the hill could have been an entrance into a deep cavern that housed the creature, the Claytons would quietly observe the hill from a remote location for several weeks. According to the elderly couple, roughly after a month of observing the hilltop strip mine, they would spot two hairy bipedal ape-like creatures walking around the hilltop and seemingly disappearing into the strip mine entrance. It was at this point that the Claytons believed that the creatures must have been living inside the strip mine and that there could have been a whole family of the monsters. The Claytons also believed that the many reported disappearing dogs were evidence of the creatures invading the nearby area. Several weeks prior to their grandchildren spotting the monster in the gravel pit, the Claytons had discovered their German Shepherd with its neck broken, laid inside the gravel pit, and believed that the mysterious creatures were the ones responsible. The 1800 wild Bigfoot encounter of Okefenokee Swamp. Located on the border of the state of Florida and Georgia is a 438,000-acre swampland that stretches across the state borders and houses a wide variety of undiscovered animal and insect species. This peat-filled wetland, referred to as the Okefenokee Swamp, has been at the center of several encounters with the skunk ape creature and is often believed to be the last unexplored refuge of the creatures in the modern day. Even more interesting, the name Okefenokee is a native Creek Indian word that roughly translates to mean the land of the trembling earth and seems to reference a massive creature that's known for shaking the earth as it walks. The oldest known skunk ape encounter to have occurred within the Okefenokee Swamp was reported back during the winter of 1828. According to the report made by two eyewitnesses, both of which were amateur hunters who were looking to explore the surrounding area, the two men came across what they referred to as a giant. Originally, their expedition began as a short hunting party, but rather than turn back at the height of their excitement, the two men's trip continued for another several weeks as they traveled deeper into the swamp, recording brief encounters with bears, panthers, alligators, and overgrown snakes. Roughly 3 weeks into their hunting trip, the men claimed to have heard the sound of loud screaming. The screams sounded much deeper and louder than a man could naturally produce. As they glanced around the woods surrounding their camp to investigate the source of the noise, the men then heard what they described as the sound of heavy stomping, as if a large creature was running through the woods surrounding their camp. Unsure of whether or not the creature was a large wild animal or a distressed man, the two hunters decided to light a fire and stay within the proximity of their makeshift camp until daylight, as the day was soon ending and darkness was fast approaching. Despite the roaring fire to help keep the nearby woods illuminated, the men complained that they were unable to sleep due to the strange sounds they continued to hear, despite no creature being visible anywhere near their location. Additionally, it became necessary to gather nearby scraps of wood to keep the fire burning, and so the men were forced to venture slightly more and more into the surrounding darkness to maintain their light source. By the next morning, the men investigated the nearby woods and wetlands, hoping to find any evidence of a creature having prowled their camp the night prior. After a few hours of looking, the men claimed that they came across several barefoot human-looking footprints that would have been impossible for any normal person to have made, mostly due to the fact that the footprints were all spaced roughly 6 feet apart and were an estimated 18 inches in length. Worried that the creature might return, the hunters immediately fled the swamp and returned to town. Oddly enough, the story of the encounter with the unknown swamp giant does not end there. Once the two hunters returned to the closest town, they told the nearby townspeople of what they had encountered and warned them that a monster might soon attack the town. Fearful of the beast, the town gathered together a hunting party of 9 men to hunt down the beast and kill it before it could attack the town. Gathered together, the men went into the swamp and traveled as far down as its southernmost part, now located in the state of Florida. After several days of searching the area, the men located sets of footprints far too large for any normal man to have created and used the footprints as a trail guiding them directly to the giant. As the men began following the footprints, they noticed that they were often spaced increasingly further apart, sometimes disappearing completely and reappearing elsewhere in the swamps, as if According to the 9 witnesses, a massive humanoid creature covered in hair all over its body suddenly ran straight through the camp, toppling over several tents, and began tearing apart the equipment and supplies of the traveling men. Fearing for their lives, the men grabbed their guns and fired at the creature, causing the giant to retaliate by overpowering the men and ripping the heads off of 5 members of the party, tossing their limp bodies several feet as if they weighed next to nothing. The remaining 4 members continued firing at the creature, sending several rounds of bullets through its chest before the creature fell down in a low grumble and passed away shortly after. After closer examination of the giant's body, the men estimated the humanoid creature to have been slightly over 13 feet in height and appeared to look exactly like a man with the exception of its tremendous size and full body covering of hair. While observing the body, the men continued to hear the sound of screaming in the surrounding woods, similar to what the 2 hunters had experienced on their journey several days prior. Believing that the screaming could be coming from a dozen more of the giant creatures, the men packed up their equipment and began moving out of the swamp during the night, unable to wait until morning out of fear that a retaliatory attack would take place if they continued to stay. Once the 4 men returned to the nearest town, they told the townspeople what happened to the 5 other men who were attacked, and that they estimated that a dozen more of the giant creatures were still out there in the nearby swamps. Fearing that an attack would eventually reach the town, the men began traveling throughout the area and warning people of an impending attack from giants. On the 1st of January 1829, a local reporter that wrote for the Georgia newspaper Statesman would interview the men and retell their story for local publishing. By February of that year, less than 30 days after the original publication, reprintings of the story spread to neighboring communities and would see a February issue published in the Connecticut newspaper, The Sentinel, warning traveling parties to stay clear of the Okefenokee swamp.